As we return once more to ponder the big question of human origins, we find again that sense of freedom from the narrow strictures of the warring factions of religion and science. So here we are. Quite literally. Previously we determined that the first appearance of the uniquely human genome on Earth was some 250,000 years ago, give or take. Alright, so because we have established the answer to the question, when? Now we must look at the who, the how, and of course, the why. Perhaps the question how is the best one to answer next. But before we can do that, we need to step back a moment and ask ourselves a couple of questions about evidence. There is a reason for this. Taking the two major explanations for the origins of humanity as a reference, let us ask the question: what have we been using as evidence? Before Darwin came along, what did we have? In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, all of the creatures, and last he created mankind. Well, that is a story that was purported to be historical. Christians went beyond that, to state that the source was God himself. The point is, that we accepted the explanation based on historical documents, although some would say they were less historical than religious. Let us then stop, for a moment, and let that sink in. Historical records. One of the most legitimate ways of determining what happened in history. So what then is the basis of the scientific explanation, well established at this point as the evolutionary principle? If we could break it down to its simplest form, we could say that it is what all science is. It is the search for patterns in the empirical world, the material world, that give us cause to develop a theory we can test. All of science is supposed to operate this way. For example, we can speculate about a force we might call gravity, that we cannot see, but we can measure its effects. From the consistent patterns and results we can state what gravity is, even if we have never seen it. Biologically speaking, we have been able to deduce from patterns and consistencies right down to the very building blocks of life, the DNA, that determine what each living form is, and what it will be, when it reproduces itself. And beyond that, we have discovered how to manipulate DNA, and the chromosome groups that are the blueprint of each distinct manifestation of life. This is what we have been doing, in fact, to create what we call GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. Once again, let us stop and absorb that. Nothing controversial or new there. GMOs have gone worldwide. We do know that sufficient testing has not been done to assess long-term effects. There are nations that have rejected the use of GM crops within their territory because there has been insufficient testing. But the fact that GMOs exist, and the technology to cut and splice genetic material is now well established, is beyond dispute. So, here is the proposal we are making. Human beings are the first GMO on Earth. That is what we are. Let us repeat that. We are the original GMO. Before the clamor of voices in our mind overwhelms us with what, where, who, how, why, and so on, let us just stop, pause for a moment. Once again, returning to what we accept as evidence, the historical records and the science. When taken in combination, we can get a remarkably clear picture of human origins. In fact, we might say that both the protagonists of our own time are right in part, the creationists and the evolutionists. Of course, the big elephant in the room remains. Who did this? This requires the manipulation of DNA by someone, some entity, or being, whatever. Let us put that aside for a time, and put the picture together first by the science, and that will give us a better picture of who could and would have done the actual genetic work. There are other important questions. If we follow the science and look at the human genome, we see some interesting phenomena. As mentioned previously, it is clear that our 23 pairs of chromosomes are a result of a fusion of 2 from a natural 24 pairs, as we see among what we have assumed are our natural ancestors in the process of evolution, the primates. As we said, it is possible for this to happen naturally, as a mutation, but the timeline does not support that. We also see that genetically speaking there are a massive number of defects in our genome. In fact, there are far too many to have occurred naturally in 250,000 years. And, by way of example, as has been pointed out by others, there is a genetic defect that leads to a birth defect we know as spina bifida. This does not allow those that have it to reproduce. How is it possible that is in our system? It should have bred out when the mutation first appeared. Suffice it to say, for anyone who is not bound by the notion that there cannot be any other advanced and capable beings other than ourselves, at any time and anywhere in the universe, much less here on Earth, the answer here is obvious. Our genome has been altered at the very least. But the other really significant takeaway from our own genetic anomalies is this. Whoever did this was either in a hurry, had less than ideal conditions, or were just amateurs learning the technique. In any event, what is certain is that we were made in a lab. For some that is poetic, considering some of the vile things that we ourselves make in a lab. We will look further into that lab in our next posts.